threat never materializes. But Washington keeps a close watch on Gaddafi's activities in Libya and abroad. The day is February 16, 1983.
Once again, American planes and ships have been moved into position to deal with a threat to peace from Libya's leader, Colonel Gaddafi. Pentagon correspondent John McWethy has this exclusive report.
ABC News has learned that the United States has secretly deployed 4 early warning AWACS planes to Egypt on short notice and has rushed the aircraft carrier Nimitz and 3 escort ships from the coast of Lebanon to Libya. Officially, the Pentagon says it is all part of exercises in the region. Unofficially, intelligence sources say the movement is a direct result of an apparent military buildup by Libya spotted in the southeastern corner of that country. A buildup which Pentagon sources fear could foreshadow a move to overthrow the pro-American government of Sudan headed by President Ghaffar Namiri. The Libyan buildup, which includes several dozen Soviet-made combat aircraft, has caused so much concern that Egypt is preparing to reposition some of its forces to the Sudan-Libyan-Egyptian border region. Last week, Egypt's President, Hosni Mubarak, put in an urgent request for American assistance. For more than a week, the U.S. government has had detailed knowledge of what Gaddafi had in mind for Sudan. ABC News learned earlier this week, but refrained from reporting at the request of certain government officials, that Gaddafi had infiltrated into Sudan a small army of guerrillas and insurgents, all bent on the overthrow of the pro-American government headed by Ghaffar Namiri. Gaddafi's plan was explained to ABC News with the understanding that it not be reported until Sudan had broken it. That happened today. The plan called for the heavily armed insurgents to assassinate Namiri, his top political and military leaders to seize control of the capital city Khartoum, immobilizing Sudan's small military. Simultaneously, Libyan fighters and bombers, which had been repositioned in the southeastern corner of Libya, were to make airstrikes at key points throughout the city. Because the aircraft would have been operating at maximum range, the plan called for the insurgents on the ground to take over Khartoum's airport and for Libyan planes to land there. Once the airport was secured, the plan called for Libyan C-130 transports to bring in the first Libyan combat troops to help support what would have then been the new government of Sudan. But with the American and Egyptian moves this week, and now the arrest of saboteurs and insurgents in Khartoum, the old government of Sudan seems secure. John McWethy, ABC News, the Pentagon.
It is now widely believed there was an attempted coup today against Libya's Colonel Gaddafi. Reports reaching Western Europe from Libya suggest that a group of anti-Gaddafi gunmen attacked a barracks compound in Tripoli where Gaddafi spends a lot of time. Libyan security has reportedly put the revolt down, but the situation remains unclear. Al Dale has been monitoring events from London.
Libyan television tonight showed pictures of bullet-riddled bodies lying in the streets of Tripoli. The Libyan version is that a group of British-trained terrorists took over an apartment building and were killed when government troops moved in. There was no mention of an attempted coup, but reports from the city indicated heavy fighting in the vicinity of Colonel Gaddafi's residence, an army compound on Tripoli's southern edge. Airline passengers arriving back in London tonight said what sounded like artillery and rifle fire went on for hours.
The fighting went on for a long time, so we figured that if they were getting into the barracks, they must have failed, because there was a lot of fighting.
Libyan television broadcast these scenes of Colonel Gaddafi, apparently to show he's all right, but there was no indication of when the pictures were taken. Earlier, state TV showed what was described as a slain terrorist who had infiltrated into Libya with others on Sunday. The broadcast said the alleged terrorists had been trained in the Sudan and in special camps in Britain, echoing Gaddafi's recent theme that certain nations, including Britain and America, were acting against him.
These nations have proved to the world that they are terrorists, and they're stupid.
Tripoli is described as tense but quiet tonight after the country's borders and main airport had been closed for much of the day. Al Dale, ABC News, London.
Your leader is alive and well. That was Gaddafi's message as he made an unexpected appearance in downtown Tripoli to acknowledge cheers from hundreds of supporters and issue a warning to those who are trying to kill him.
We have the right to fight here and to follow our enemies everywhere.
He wouldn't say if he plans to dispatch hit squads to other countries, but he blamed the U.S. and Britain for most of the trouble. Today in London, a spokesman for a group claiming responsibility warned it would step up its attacks against Gaddafi.
Their aim was to eliminate Gaddafi personally and take over the barracks, which are the nerve center of Gaddafi's government and Gaddafi's regime.
In their effort yesterday, they got only to this apartment building, 3 miles away from Gaddafi's barracks, before soldiers with rockets and tanks overpowered them. Gaddafi is trying to play down the danger. Today, he strolled casually through a clothing store, acting more concerned about fashion than assassination.
Are you afraid of other attempts being made on your life?
No, I'm not afraid at all. What is it?
Colonel Gaddafi has long insisted that he has no political enemies, but one would never know that by the security that was out in force here today. ABC News, Tripoli.
Libyan strongman Colonel Muammar Gaddafi has quashed another coup attempt against him, according to the Egyptian government-controlled newspaper Al-Aram, which claims that units of the Libyan Army and Air Force mutinied rather than obey orders from Gaddafi to invade Tunisia. According to Al-Aram, Gaddafi's personal guards crushed the mutiny, and several Libyan military officers involved now face an urgent court-martial.
Despite the attempts to overthrow him, Gaddafi remains firmly in charge. In 1985, a series of terrorist actions throughout the world shock and anger America. Gaddafi is identified as a central figure. The day is December 27, 1985.
The terrorists struck at the same hour, 9:15 in the morning, at the airport in Rome and in Vienna. 16 people are dead, more than 100 injured.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. It has happened again. There was no explanation, of course. As the holiday travelers were lining up to check in at the airline counters, the men of violence pounced without warning. The terrorist target was clearly the Israeli airline El Al and anyone associated with it. They didn't know who they were killing, and they didn't appear to care. Our first report is from Rome. 13 were killed there. And here's ABC's Hal Walker.
These were some of the holiday travelers who never made it out of Rome's international airport when the 4 gunmen unleashed their attack. Caught by surprise in the lethal hail of bullets and hand grenades from the attackers, they formed a grim tableau of death. The attack took place in one corner of the public area of the airport, entered directly from the street and accessible without a security check. The killers launched their assault from the vicinity of a hamburger stand and coffee shop several yards from the check-in counters for El Al and Trans World Airlines, crowded with passengers lining up for their flights. Witnesses said the men first tossed their grenades, then began firing indiscriminately. Many of the dead were gunned down in line, others while eating breakfast at the coffee counter. At least 3 Americans were among the dead. One, Natasha Simpson, the 11-year-old daughter of Associated Press editor Victor Simpson, and his wife Daniela. The mother was outside the terminal when the shooting started. She said she rushed in to screams and cries and saw her husband dripping blood, her son on the floor. They are both okay, she said, but I lost my 11-year-old daughter.
They buried 11-year-old Natasha Simpson here today. She was the youngest victim of Friday's bloody terrorist attacks on airports in Vienna and Rome. 4 of the attackers were killed, but 2 were captured in Vienna and another one in Rome, and their interrogations have begun to reveal a complex web involving Palestinian terrorist leader Abu Nidal and his Libyan patron, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. First, the 3 surviving terrorists say they were all members of the Palestinian group headed by Abu Nidal, who split off from Yasser Arafat in 1974. Abu Nidal, who had previously operated out of Iraq and Syria, is now believed headquartered in Libya. Second, the 4 terrorists who hit the Rome airport entered Italy with Moroccan passports. Authorities have said these passports given to Libya by someone in Morocco. Third, in Vienna, the 3 terrorists carried Tunisian passports. Tunisian authorities confirmed today all had been lost or confiscated from Tunisian workers in Libya. Fourth, a German newspaper quoting German and Israeli intelligence sources said this morning the Abu Nidal group called the Fatah Revolutionary Council received $12.7 million from Colonel Gaddafi in 1985.
VH1 his fist at world peace and world opinion, daring anyone, particularly the United States, to move against him. Long accused by Washington of plotting and abetting terrorism, Gaddafi, the strong man of Libya, is now accused of harboring and financing the Palestinian terrorist group of Abu Nidal, the group believed to be responsible for the Rome and Vienna airport massacres. And Americans are angry. Angry enough in Maine to wrap up their kitchen garbage and mail it to Gaddafi.
Angry enough here in Washington to get the fleet moving while pondering whether to actually use it against Gaddafi. What will Washington do? And Jerusalem, and London, and Paris, and Rome? John McCarthy, our national security correspondent, surveys the options.
In Libya today, anti-American demonstrations in the streets of Tripoli, or so Western news people were told. They were not allowed to witness a supposedly spontaneous event, only to see pictures of it on Libyan television. Out in the field, U.S. intelligence sources say the Libyan military has been at a high state of alert for the last 2 days. Pilots in their cockpits, patrol boats at sea monitoring Libyan waters. At the Libyan air base near the city of Sirte, technicians work round the clock to get Libya's new long-range anti-aircraft missiles, SAM-5s, ready for action. Missiles that could threaten American P-3 and RC-135 reconnaissance planes that patrol Libya's coast over international waters. And 2 days ago, there was Muammar Gaddafi himself, denying that he had anything to do with the airport massacres in Rome and Vienna, and making some threats of his own.
If there is an aggression on Libya, it will be considered the beginning of the end.
He threatened violence to Americans in their own streets if the U.S. attempted military moves against terrorists that the Reagan administration says are harbored in Libya.
We've always retained the right to respond to terrorist acts in an appropriate, measured, focused way, and other victimized states have a similar right. The military option is one that we have always retained.
Today, the aircraft carrier Coral Sea left port in Naples, Italy, and headed for the central Mediterranean. U.S. officials say it will stay there until the White House decides what to do. In Norfolk today, thousands of Navy crewmen are told to ready their ships for sea. The aircraft carrier America, the battleship Iowa, and half a dozen escorts. No steaming orders yet, but military sources say the ships are bound for the Mediterranean.
I'm not aware that we're doing anything out of the ordinary at all. We've had various maneuvers and practices there, and we're carrying on as normal.
But no special U.S. buildup, sir?
No. You've got to stop listening to Gaddafi.
Despite the president's deflection, military sources say they have been hard at work on contingency planning for a week. Plans that range from strikes off aircraft carriers to FB-111 precision bombing runs from bases in Europe. As yet, no decision to strike has been made, but the options are open.
January 7, 1986. President Reagan announces an end to virtually all economic activity between the United States and Muammar Gaddafi's Libya, calling the Rome and Vienna attacks outrageous actions by an outlaw regime. At his press conference, President Reagan is asked about the possibility of Libyan terrorist reprisals.
Mr. President, how seriously do you take the threat of Mr. Gaddafi that if there is some indication of Israeli or American military retaliation, that Washington, D.C. will become a target for hit squads?
Well, I wish he was planning to do that himself. I'd be happy to welcome him. But, no, how can you not take seriously a man that has proven that he is as irrational as he is on things of this kind? I find he's not only a barbarian, but he's flaky.
January 24th, 1986. The United States begins military exercises in the Mediterranean Sea near Libya.
Good evening, everyone. On the second day of U.S. naval maneuvers off the coast of Libya, Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi is trying to show he's not intimidated. Gaddafi boarded a Libyan missile boat today and sailed into the Gulf of Sidra, an area he says is off limits to the United States. The details now from Hal Walker.
It was Colonel Gaddafi's turn once again to hurl the charge of terrorism against the United States. The Libyan leader staged a news conference for a score of journalists brought to him on board one of his Navy's missile patrol boats. Gaddafi denounced the current U.S. Navy maneuvers taking place in the Mediterranean off the Libyan coast and called on fellow Arab nations to join in resisting what he termed American aggression.
That America is staging organized terrorism against the peaceful Libyan Arab people.
Then, to the cheers of his followers on shore, the leader sailed off toward the Gulf of Sidra.